What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 13 NFL Power Rankings. It's a big week, a lot of movement, especially at the top of the board here, so make sure you stick around. A couple bits of housekeeping before we hop in here. Again, please do hit that like button if you enjoy, you want to support the channel. It's the easiest way to do it right there. Talk about supporting the channel. Next time you're shopping for tickets, do it on SeatGeek. It's the best interface. Use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy. You will save $20 on your next purchase and support the channel in the process. Also, check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast uploaded yesterday. If you want to hear me talk more about these teams, I did so in depth this week, my longest show yet. And then lastly, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. I am going to be doing a recap/regrading of the 2017 NFL Draft, looking back on my grades at the time of that draft. So it's going to be a fun video. You're not going to want to miss it. So we'll see you for that. Turn on notifications so you don't miss that upload. All right, let's get into the rankings. Like I said, a lot of movement per usual this week, but at number 32, it's staying the same. The Washington Redskins. Yeah, they beat the Jeff Driscoll-led Lions at home. It took a kick return touchdown and 2 missed field goals to do it, to scrape that one away. Not necessarily the definition of an impressive win, especially when Dwayne Haskins, the only thing that's left to really watch this year to see if you have something in Dwayne Haskins, he was terrible in this game. So you got to get better quarterback play. And the rest of this year is just going to be evaluating what you have there in Dwayne Haskins. I wouldn't be stunned if they kind of did what the Cards did with Josh Rosen and moved on if they really liked a quarterback in this upcoming class. All right, number 31, the Cincinnati Bengals. I know they are winless, but they've been more competitive the last 2 weeks. Also, I would have dropped them, but they did announce that Andy Dalton will be returning this week. And personally, I believe they actually would have had a really good chance to win these last 2 weeks with Andy Dalton, especially this week against the Steelers, who they almost pulled out, by the way. Most of you probably weren't watching that game, but they were driving to take the lead at the end, and Tyler Boyd fumbled near the goal line. So they very well could have won this week. Number 30, the New York Giants. I feel like this team, they're going to be okay with a better offseason. They got cap space. They're going to have a great draft pick here. And, Daniel Jones can move the ball a little bit here, but I just feel like we're going to sit back here in 4 years and be like, wow, this team was really mediocre for the last 3 years, and it's time for a new era, kind of like the Dolphins with Tannehill or the Titans with Mariota. That's kind of how I view this Giants organization. Then the Miami Dolphins themselves are going to come in here at number 29. They've done a good job of developing within the season here. They were rolling out a miserable roster to start, but they've gotten guys to kind of find their roles and develop. Guys like Nick Needham, Vince Beagle here for this team. So it's going to be a fun offseason for this team. Tons of draft capital, cap space. And I wouldn't sleep on Josh Rosen coming in here next year as the starter if this team decides to wait on quarterback, and maybe he shows some things next year. We'll see. Number 28, the Detroit Lions. They're going to sneak into the bottom tier here for the first time this year. I mean, most of this is just Matthew Stafford, and it looking more and more like this team is and definitely should shut Matthew Stafford down. It just kind of screams Andrew Luck, Colts, Cam Newton, Panthers. What's the point of playing him at this point? Just get a better draft pick and reassess in the offseason. I will say that this team should at least monitor the coaching market, because I'm not going to say Matt Patricia's been a disgrace here, but it certainly has not gone as well as you would hope after 2 years. So now we've got a tier jump up here. The Denver Broncos are going to stay at number 27, where they have been just kind of existing there with Brandon Allen. I would expect them to play Drew Lock as soon as he's physically able to. You just got to see what you got there, because I've been saying, especially on the podcast, that this team, I think, needs to ask Elway to resign. If he won't, then you just fire him. They need a new general manager. They need a new mindset. They need to break off this idea that they're going to reimagine the 2015 defense or whatever and be a defensive-minded team. You've got some playmakers on offense. You got to start building this thing for 2020 with a good passing game, a better offensive coach, and all this stuff. And it's unfortunate for Vic Fangio, because I think he's a good coach, but just kind of a crappy situation. Then number 26, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're dropping down a spot here. I'm really excited for my rebuild of this team, which is going to be after I complete the Redskins rebuild. I'm actually going to move them to London in that rebuild. But anyway, back to real life. This team, I think you got to play Gardner Minshew. I'm not even saying that Nick Foles can't be the starter for next year, but you got to at least continue to assess what you have in Minshew and find out if he could be like the next Dak Prescott, because he played at a really nice level for a good chunk of games, and this team clearly was playing better with him. So why stick with Nick Foles at this point? You can always bring him back next year if you decide that Minshew is the guy that we saw in his last start as opposed to pretty much every start before then. Number 25, the New York Jets. They have some life. Pretty much everyone, myself included, laughed at Sam Darnold when he said 3 weeks ago that this team's not out of the playoff race yet. Well, they've now since won 3 games in a row. They play the Bengals and the Dolphins the next 2 weeks, so they're going to be 6-7 most likely. I mean, hey, it's not going to happen, but it just might. I don't know. But you're definitely encouraged by seeing Adam Gase and Sam Darnold weather the storm here. And Gase is not, I would say, innocent of a lot of the flaws here with this Jets team, but I do think it extends beyond Adam Gase because I think he's a decent offensive coach. I'm not saying he's great or anything, but he's been good. Sam Darnold's been outstanding the last 3 weeks. Now, the next 5 weeks of this season, I think, are going to be very telling for what to expect of Sam Darnold, because there's been Jameis Winston comparisons, and then there's been people, myself included, saying that this guy has elite potential. If he's going to start trending towards the elite side of things, which he has played the last 3 weeks, he played like that against Dallas. I would say he's got 4 elite performances this year, but he's also got some of the worst quarterback performances of the season. So he needs to continue trending upwards, prove that his bad performance was just getting shook by the Patriots and then still being flustered after that. And if he continues to play like this the rest of the year, they don't need to make the playoffs. They don't need to go on this amazing run. They can have a lot of energy going into next year with a really nice looking Sam Darnold. But only time will tell what his career trend is going to be. Whether he's going to be Jameis Winston and be good for 2 weeks, suck for 2 weeks, or if he can now almost have a fresh start heading into next year with a lot of momentum. All right, let's move on. Number 24, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 23, the Atlanta Falcons. I'm just going to combine these two because they're the same team. They have a coach that you don't really know if he should be the guy next year. Actually, with the Falcons, Dan Quinn has got to go. But these teams score a lot of points and don't play defense. It's very simple. Let's move on. Number 22, the Arizona Cardinals. They're actually very similar to those two teams we just mentioned, although they're younger, have a quarterback that potentially could be an elite guy before too long if he isn't already. And then you have Cliff Kingsbury, who clearly is going to be the coach moving forward. He's done an outstanding job. Going to be a fun offseason to see if they choose to push their resources towards making that offense more explosive behind Kyler Murray, or if they want to focus on that defense that can't seem to swat a fly out there. So, going to be a big offseason for this team. Could be a pretty big hype team depending how their offseason goes as far as like being a fringe wildcard team or something like that. So then we have a tier gap here, and this tier is basically AFC wildcard contenders and NFC teams that would be wildcard contenders if they were in the AFC, but they're stuck in the NFC. These are teams that just are not really any sort of legitimate playoff threats, though, either way you slice it. So number 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I actually bet against this team this week, and it was looking like a damn good bet for a while. The reason I made that bet is Mason Rudolph. I thought he was the single worst quarterback that was starting in the NFL this week, and unfortunately for my wallet and my bank account, Mike Tomlin caught on it about halftime and put Duck Hodges in. So Hodges is going to give this team a more competent, functional offense, but it's still no good offense at all. It's going to be a team that's got to win scrappy, low-scoring games. They have a high floor but a low ceiling. Then we got the Tennessee Titans, and, you know, I get it, Titans fans. You want to be taken more seriously, and frankly, you probably should. This is strictly a joke locking you in here at number 20. To be real with you, they probably belong in the 16 to 20 range. But how many times do we have to do this with the Tennessee Titans? They have such a hard schedule moving forward. I think they're going to lose out, and I don't really feel like raising them up because I feel like this team is just destined for mediocrity. And even if they bring Tannehill back, who has sparked some life into this team, I think they're going to get stuck around this 20 spot next year again as well. So for now, I'm locking them in there at number 20. Now, if they come out and beat the Colts next week, things will get more interesting, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. All right, number 19, the Carolina Panthers. They put up a fight this week, honestly more of a fight than I thought they would. They're continuing to evaluate Kyle Allen, who played really well in this game against the Saints. I thought he played really well against Green Bay the week before. So, I mean, if this is the version of Kyle Allen that we see for the rest of this season and this team remains competitive and they win 10 games, I mean, maybe he is the guy next year. I don't know. I still feel like he's probably a backup type because he's kind of done what flashy backups do and had some really bad games and some really concerning throws and turnover-worthy plays and stuff throughout the year. But he's doing some impressive things there, and I think it's going to be an interesting next 5 weeks here in Carolina as far as what is Kyle Allen. Number 18, the Cleveland Browns. They're moving up 4 spots. I mean, they beat the crap out of the Dolphins. That is what it is, but Baker's playing a lot better. This team has sort of figured out an identity with this offense, and then it's wait and see on what this defense is going to look like against real teams without Myles Garrett. This team would have a lot more potential to play spoiler in the AFC playoffs if they had Myles Garrett, because he gives them that high upside defense, because this offense, I feel like, is still kind of flash in the pan, and you can't rely on them to be an elite offense for 4 quarters. But this team has a pretty easy schedule down the stretch. They just could go 9-7 and backdoor their way into the AFC wild card, kind of like I predicted in my deep dive of this team. Number 17, the Chicago Bears, quite possibly the most predictable team in the NFL right now. They're pretty much going to play every game 17-14 more or less, and 1 week they'll be the team that has 17, and 1 week they'll be the team that has 14. It's going to be fun to see who their quarterback ends up being next year, whether it's Phillip Rivers, Andy Dalton, Mariota, Tannehill, Cam Newton. Lots of veteran options available. I do think they're a quarterback away from being a wild card or even NFC North contender next year. That defense is still outstanding, and this team is still a little scary to play against, but that offensive ceiling is just so low. Number 16, the LA Chargers. They're staying put here on the bye week. I still think they can beat most teams on this list and lose to most teams on this list. So hence the number 16 ranking. Number 15, the Oakland Raiders. And this is where I get to, I guess, toot my horn a little bit. A lot of people would expect them to fall this week. And I do want to say, like, the people, mostly Ravens fans, that were like, oh, he never gives the Ravens any respect. I bet if they lose, he would drop them by 8, no matter who it was playing. And it's like, that's so unfair. Like, I treat every team the same way. I was low on the Raiders heading into this week. I had money on the Jets to beat the Raiders this week. They did not surprise me by losing to the Jets. I've said this pass rush is miserable. I've defended that point against Raiders fans the last few weeks. Just because Clelin Ferrell and Max Crosby look good against the Chargers and Bengals tackles, who are the worst duos in recent memory, it doesn't mean you have a good pass rush. Everyone looks good against those teams. So you come out and play a below average Jets team that just isn't like worst ever tackle duos, and you can't get any sort of pass rush, and you just get the snot knocked out of you. So I think this Raiders team is competitive. They'll bounce back a little bit. I think this offense is really solid, but this defense is as bad as I thought it was. And yes, I was wrong about this team being a bottom feeder, but I think they're much closer to the back 10 of the NFL than they are to the top 10 of the NFL. They got a long ways to go. They've had a nice season, though, and it's going to be fun to watch them in Vegas next year. So let's move on. Number 14, the Indianapolis Colts. And I kind of hinted at the fact that I thought I may even be a little low on this team last week, but I wanted to see how they looked against the Texans, because this is a team that I've really said all year that they can beat up on bad teams. They're a great culture, a really steady, deep team, and I like a lot of aspects of this team, but I have also called them a low ceiling team all year, and I do feel like that's kind of what we saw against the Texans. Jacoby Brissett's good. He's a starting caliber quarterback. I talked about him a lot on the podcast this week, but at the end of the day, I just think he's a solid quarterback that is going to have a hard time competing with the guys like, say, Deshaun Watson. So it puts them in a tough spot. I do like the Colts. I think they have a pretty solid chance of being either the 5 or 6 seed in the AFC, and that transitions to the team that up to this point, and really even this week, most people would say is a lock for the 5 seed in the AFC wildcard, and that is the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are 8-3 and in great position to get that 5 seed in the wildcard, but I do think it has not been stated enough how big of an absolute joke this schedule has been. And people don't want to hear that, especially Bills fans, but just listen to this. Here's the Bills' wins this year. The New York Jets, the New York Giants, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Dolphins twice, the Redskins, and a Brandon Allen-led Broncos team. That's 7 wins. And then they beat the Titans, but the Titans also missed 4 field goals, and the Bills won by 7. Are any of those wins remotely impressive? No, they're not. I mean, just look at where those teams we just listed are ranked on this list. Like, if this team, who has to go at Dallas, Baltimore, at Pittsburgh, at New England, and then plays the Jets week 17, if they lost out, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. It's just been a historically easy schedule. So we'll see if this team, who when they've played competent teams, they've lost in the Browns, the Eagles, and the Patriots. They got to prove that they can beat real teams. They beat the Titans, but they were gifted it from 4 field goals. So they're in good position. I do like the Bills. I talked about them on the podcast. I'm not trying to hate on this team. I'm just trying to be very real that this team is far from safe. I don't think it's as good as a lot of people realize. All right, let's move on. The LA Rams only going to drop down a spot here, but God, they just embarrassed themselves on Monday Night Football. And I'll just be full honest here. I picked the Rams to win in this game, and it wasn't even that I was not afraid of Lamar playing well. I just thought that this Rams defense has played so well the last few weeks, and this team is well coached and has a lot of talent at home in a primetime game. I expected them to come out and play for their lives, knowing that their season could end with a loss here on Monday night, and they played the opposite. They got just steamrolled at the line of scrimmage. They didn't even give themselves a chance. So their season's done. I did a breakdown on them weeks ago about how this team's future is basically screwed, and they gave up even more of that future for Jalen Ramsey. So the Rams are just vanished at this point. I don't see this team being good for 3 or 4 years. And at what point does that come back to Sean McVay? All right, let's move on. Tier gap up here. 3 teams in this next tier. It's going to be the Eagles. They're going to move us up a spot. That's just because the Rams completely embarrassed themselves. The Eagles embarrassed themselves this week too. They got to figure some things out on offense. Now, I do think they're going to get those receivers a little healthier, and their schedule is much easier down the rest of the stretch. They play the Giants twice, the Dolphins, and the Redskins. And then they play the Cowboys in a game that's probably going to be for the NFC East. So as bad as they've been, their defense is really coming alive, and they are by no means out of the playoff race. They could be a 9 or a 10 win team that gets a home game in the playoffs. So I'm not going to write the Eagles off. And then we got the Texans at number 10. Big win this week. Deshaun and Hopkins really getting the job done. I still don't trust this defense to hold up in the playoffs, but this team, you just can't quite count them out with that elite duo of Hopkins and Watson. And then the Cowboys at number 9. They played competitive against the against the Patriots. They're a competitive team. Dak's going to play better moving forward. That was just a really tough condition to play the game in against the best defense on the road in that rain. But this team does have problems of their own. And just in general, like inconsistency. All right, tier gap up here into the top 8. And for the first time, we're going to have a tier gap inside the top 3 this week. But a huge drop this week for the Green Bay Packers, who had been hanging on to some bigger wins early on in this year. And kind of like I've been treating every top team, where like if you get one bad loss, the Saints to the Falcons, the Vikings almost to the Broncos, the Packers to the Chargers, you're allowed to kind of look like that one week. But this was the second time in 3 weeks where the Packers just could not stand a chance. They couldn't block anyone. Rodgers looked flat. The receivers looked like they're walking out there and dropping everything. Like, this team's just got issues. Now, they do play the Giants and the Redskins. They're going to turn this thing around and look a lot better when they head into Minnesota in 2-3 weeks, pretty much for the division. But they have got a lot of issues to figure out there, and I think this front office deserves a lot of blame. I know they did some nice things, bringing in the Smith brothers, but, I mean, outside of a couple good draft picks in Jaire Alexander and Darnell Savage and those two good signings, they have left this team still completely inept of talent. There is no reason that when your right tackle goes down that Alex Light should be who you got to lean on at right tackle, and for these receivers to be as poor as they are outside of Devontae Adams. Packers fans laughed at me when I said this team should take Marquise Brown with the 12th overall pick because they thought Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Geronimo Allison were the answer. They never were going to be the answer, and Rodgers is clearly fed up with it. But Rodgers got to play better too. All right, number 7, the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is going to be the team that hates me the most this week, and that's fine. There's a lot of good teams in the NFL at the top here. I just think that this week was a little more about the Eagles beating themselves. I think Seattle does get credit for how good they are in big-time games. They have that swagger, Russell Wilson, that confidence that they're going to win these games, and that definitely says a lot. But there is a talent differential, I think, between the Seahawks and the remaining teams in the top 6 as far as roster talent is concerned. So number 6, the New England Patriots, they're going to climb up a couple spots. I will say that a little bit of me thought that those elite defensive performances was more about their schedule early on, and it definitely helped them get historic numbers on defense. But there's no doubt that this defense is quite possibly the best in the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady era. I don't know how the hell that Bill Belichick isn't the consensus coach of the year candidate, considering they lost their best defensive player in Trey Flowers from last year. They lost their defensive coordinator, and Bill Belichick said, hold my beer, I got this, and they have the best defense in the NFL outside of maybe San Francisco. So, the defense is incredible. The offense does have a lot of issues that I still don't think are fixed, and I don't know if they will be fixed, but this is a really dominant defense. And it's the Patriots who play just great fundamental football. Number 5, the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to climb up a spot on the bye this week. I think that they're a really solid team. And now that home field is potentially more in play as the Packers, the gap between them and the Packers is closing, that's going to get more scary for the NFC. This Vikings team has played better on the road, but no one's truly afraid of them coming into your stadium compared to some other teams at the top here. But if you got to go to Minnesota, no one wants to do that. I think it's the hardest place to play in the NFL. Number 4, the Kansas City Chiefs. They were on bye this week. I do think this is a great opportunity if you are a bettor to get in on the Chiefs' Super Bowl odds. I just think that they've been kind of swept under the rug a little bit due to a lot of injuries and a lot of the narratives this year with Patrick Mahomes being hurt. I just think the market is forgetting about the Chiefs a little bit. Coming off the bye, they're getting healthy. They need to get the left side of their offensive line healthy. They need Tyreek Hill healthy. They need Chris Jones and Frank Clark healthy on defense. But all these guys are going to come back, and I think the Chiefs are going to remind a lot of people about what this team was all about heading into the year. Number 3, the New Orleans Saints. They're going to drop down 2 spots here, just some inconsistencies the last few weeks. Their defense has faltered at times. Their offense has faltered at times. I do think it was big for them to show that this offense can kick it into overdrive and help carry this team when the defense does falter, because it is 2019 and eventually your defense is going to break. So good to see the offense carry things a little bit more. And then we have a tier gap up here. I think the 2 clear-cut best teams in the NFL revealed themselves this week. And I actually kind of sat here and thought a good bit about who should be 1 and 2. It's really hard. I mean, you could go tied for first, and I wouldn't argue it for a second. But I'm going to go Baltimore at number 2 and San Francisco at number 1. And the beauty is these 2 teams are playing this week. So not only did the 2 best teams reveal themselves on primetime this week, but we get to see this matchup next week, and it is going to be glorious. Don't know if they're going to flex this one to Sunday Night Football. They really should. But you got Lamar Jackson and this offense just rolling. You can't distribute enough credit to number one, of course, Lamar, but the offensive line and how good they've been. These receivers, you got to count Mark Andrews, Mark Ingram, Marquise Brown was incredible tonight. And then this front office for building a perfect team around Lamar's skill set. It's just been beautiful. And then the defense with Harbaugh, I know he's not necessarily a defensive guy, but this coaching staff just developing these guys on this defensive side of the ball, taking them from heading into the year what I thought was going to be a solid defense to a top defense. This team is just clicking on all cylinders right now. And then you got the 49ers at number one, just dominating Green Bay this week. I do think the number one reason I look to for why I put them above them is that pass rush with Bosa. They did what they did to the Packers this week without D Ford out there. So I do think that D line and kind of the upside of that defense is what sort of set this thing over, because it's not like the Niners offense is some slouch. So this is going to be a power matchup. I can't wait. Obviously the winner of this game is going to emerge as the best team in the NFL next week. So best of luck to you. All right, those are the power rankings this week. Definitely the longest one yet. But I love this stuff. I hope you guys do too. Hit that like button. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.